All right, so it says Kaya had only one coupon for 10% off of one frozen turkey breast. The turkey breast cost $8.50 and she wanted to buy two. So the first thing we need to figure out is how much is 10% of $8.50. So 10% converted to a decimal is 0.10. So what you need to do is take your calculator to figure out the cost of one turkey breast, take $8.50 and multiply that by 0.10. So go ahead and use your calculator. So this is a 3-step question. So the first step, take your calculator and multiply $8.50 by 0.10. That's going to tell you how much they're going to subtract at the register. So when you do that, you should get 85 cents. Who got 85 cents? The second step would be to subtract that from the cost of the turkey. So take $8.50 minus 0.85. So that's step 2. Take $8.50 minus 85 cents. And you should get $7 and something. I think it's $7.65. I don't know. Is that right? $7.65? Okay. So then your last step would be to add that, because she said she was buying two. If she was going to buy one, that would be what she would pay. But she wants to buy two. So the coupon is going to take 10% off one. And then she would have to add the cost of the second one. So in your calculator, go ahead and add $7.65 plus $8.50 and choose A, B, C, or D. So we know it's not D because she wanted to buy two. So what would you pick, A, B, C, or D?
Letter A.
Letter A, and that would be your answer. So today we're going to learn synthetic division. So in your note packet, go to page 11. Go to page 11 in your note. So the last test, we talked about long division. That's where we had to divide, put that on the top, then we had to multiply it, change both signs, and add. Well, synthetic division is a lot easier than long division because we use our root instead of our factor. All right, so let's go ahead and go to page 11. For long division, we use our factor. And for synthetic division, we use it's either, we'll say answer, which is the same thing as the root. That's what we use for synthetic. So the first thing we have to do is we have to be able to recognize the coefficients, which is just the numbers. The numbers, not the x's. So if we take away the x's and we only write the numbers, we call that coefficients. So for example, in number 1, 3x squared minus 5x plus 1, our coefficients would be 3, -5, and +1. And that would be it. For number 2, our coefficients would be, again, only the numbers. So there's an invisible -1 right here. So our coefficients would be -1, positive 3, positive 6, and negative 11. So go ahead and write that. So we got a negative 1, a positive 3, a positive 6, and a negative 11. Now for the third one, we have to be careful because do you see how we have an x to the power of 3 right here? Do you see an x to the power of 3 over here? See how we went from a 4 to a 2? Let me zoom in. Do you see how we went from 4 to 2? The reason why is because the third is 0. So what we really have in this one is x to the 4th, and then there's an invisible 0, x cubed minus 2x squared plus 3x plus 9. So there's an invisible 0. So our 5 numbers that we're going to write will be 1, 0, negative 2, positive 3, and positive 9. So first we're going to practice setting up synthetic division, and then we will actually do synthetic division. So let's go ahead and practice setting it up. So on page 12, again, we're only going to set it up. So the first thing you have to keep in mind is that we're not using the factor. So don't write this down, but we learned in long division that we would set it up like this. And we would have to divide the x squared. Sorry, that should be a 2. So this is the old way. And we would have to divide the x squared by x and put that on top, yada, yada, yada. We're not doing it that way. We're going to do synthetic division, which is actually a lot easier. Students normally find this method to be easier. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn that division bracket upside down. So instead of making it like that, we're going to flip it so it looks like an L. That's the first step. The second step is we're going to take the factor and set that equal to 0. Because remember, we don't use the factor for synthetic. We use the solution. So if you take that factor, which is x minus 7, and we solve that, we get what? Positive 7. So that's what goes here. That goes on the outside of our L. And then we list our coefficients. So in this example, we have an invisible 1. So that would be my first number. And then my next number is negative 3 and negative 21. That's how you set it up. So we're not going to solve it yet. We're just going to practice setting it up. That's how you would set up synthetic division. You set it equal to 0, you set the factor equal to 0, and then you list the coefficients. So let's look at number 2. Let's set it up. So again, we're going to take that L, turn it upside down. So let's start off by setting this equal to 0 to figure out what number goes on the outside. So take x plus 8, set it equal to 0. Yeah, that's fine. So we're going to take that x plus 8. If you set x plus 8 equal to 0, we get negative 8, and that goes right here. So for synthetic division, we take the x plus 8, set that equal to 0, and we get negative 8. And then the second step would be to list only the coefficients. So what would be my 3 numbers? What's the invisible number in front of x squared? 1. And then the next number would be positive 14 and 38. And that's it. All right, let's set up 2 more. Well, 1 more. Let's set up number 6. 6. We're going to jump down to number 6. So again, we're going to make our L. What's the number that would go on the outside?
1.
Positive 1, because we set this equal to 0, and we get 1. Now we got to be careful though, because we're missing x squared. So do you notice how we jump from x to the third to x to the first?
0.
So we got to put a 0 in between. So the first number we're going to have is a 1. But because we jumped over x squared, we put our 0 next. And then we put our -5 and our +3. So we have to be careful for our zeros. So now that we have practiced setting it up, we're going to do 4 questions where we actually work through it. And then you can start working on homework 4, which is due Friday. All right, so let's go ahead and set it up. So first of all, this is our first factor that they gave us. So I'm going to write that over here. So to find our second factor, we need to do synthetic division. So let's go ahead and flip our division sign, flip that upside down so it's a L. Set that factor equal to 0. So if x plus 2 equals 0, then -2 is going to go on the outside. All right, now we're going to list our 3 numbers, which would be a 1, a +8, and a +12. So with synthetic division, all you have to know how to do is multiply and add. So what you're always going to do is whatever this first number is, you just drop it down. We don't do anything with that first number. We just drop it down. And then you're going to multiply 1 times -2. So you're going to take 1 times -2. And 1, can you put your phone away for me? And 1 times -2 is -2. That will go here. And then you're going to add. So you can either pick up your calculator if you need to. Take 8 minus 2 or 8 plus -2. And you should get 6. And then we're going to repeat that one more time. This time we're going to take the 6 and multiply that by -2. 6 times -2 would be what? Go ahead, pick up your calculator, and you put that under the next number. Now when you add at the end, you should always end with a 0. Just like with long division, you would end with a 0. With synthetic division, you should end with a 0. So these 2 numbers represent my factors. So this is my x, and this is my constant. So my factor, when I write it over here, would be 1x plus 6. So you see how I just have the numbers. The numbers I have here, we only know the numbers in our factors. So our factors would be x plus 2 and x plus 6. And that is synthetic division. Let's do another one. Set up your L. I always like to write this x minus 3, that's my first factor. I'm going to write that over here. So now we're going to set that factor equal to 0. If you take x minus 3 and set that equal to 0, you get a +3. And now we need to write our 3 numbers. So our 3 numbers would be 3, that's a -16, and a +21. All right, let's go ahead and bring down that first number. Remember, we don't do anything with the first number. So we're going to start by doing 3 times 3. 3 times 3 would be 9. Now pick up your calculator and add. when you pick up your calculator and add negative 16 plus 9, what did you get? Negative 7. Now you're going to take that negative 7 and multiply it by 3. Negative 21, and we ended with a 0. So we know we did it right. So that means that our factor, my second factor, has a 3 and a negative 7 in there. And you just put an X behind the 3. So this first number, we get an X behind it. And that's your factors. All right, what you think so far? Thumbs up, sideways, down. I'm not asking if you can do it on the test, but do you understand the process of synthetic division? All right, so now let's do some where we actually have to factor, because it's a higher degree. So again, we have to write our factors. This is my first factor. Now let's set up synthetic division so we can find our last two factors. We're gonna flip that L, take the X minus 2, set that equal to 0. So the number that we would get would be a positive 2. That would go here. And then we have our numbers. So our numbers would be, we got a 1. What else do we have? What's my other numbers?
3.
Positive 3. What else would you say, Olivia? Negative 4. And our last number would be a negative 12. So I want you all to try to do synthetic division on your own. Bring down the 1, multiply and add. You should end with a 0. So everybody try to do that and see. Do you need a calculator? It's one. Oh, it's one there too. Who ended with a 0? All right, so you know you did it right. So we're going to bring down the 1. We take 1 times 2, which is 2. Yes.
I thought when it was 3, you're supposed to have a 0.
So you only add in a 0 if you skip over a number. So notice we're looking at our exponents. So I went from a 3rd to a 2 to a 1 to a none. So I didn't skip over a number. Okay, so we're going to add 3 plus 2, which gives you 5. 5 times 2 is 10. Negative 4 plus 10 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. Negative 12 plus 12 is 0. So now, see how we started off with an x to the power of 3? So now this first number, we're going to go down 1. This would be your x squared. And that's your x, and that's your constant. So that means that what we have left to factor would be 1x squared plus 5x plus 6. So now we have to factor this down to get our last two factors. So the first thing we need to do is find our two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to 5. So don't say it out loud, but see if you can find two numbers that multiply to give you 6 and add to 5. What are some numbers that you know multiply to give you 6? 12 and 3?
2 and 3.
Oh, 2 and 3. Who agrees that it's 2 and 3? Okay. So 2 and 3. So that means I have a 2x and a 3x. So go ahead and factor that down. Take out your GCFs. So So when we take out our GCFs here, we have an x and a plus 3. And then here, I have an x and a plus 2. So here are my factors. X plus 3, x plus 2, and x minus 2. And my box, I kind of wrote a little messy, so I can't fit that in. I'm going to write it under it. So my 3 factors are x minus 2, x plus 3, and x plus 2. All right, one more question. Let's set up synthetic division for the next one on your own. So go ahead and set up your synthetic division and see if you can get a 0 at the end. Number 4 is our last one. Set up synthetic division. What would be the number that goes on the outside of the L? Set the x minus 1 equal to 0. Well, that's my first factor, so I'm going to write that over here too. So when I set that equal to 0, I get a positive 1. And then I have a 1, a negative 1, a negative 25, and a positive 25. Go ahead and do synthetic division. Bring down that first number. Multiply and add, multiply and add, multiply and add. Who got the 0 at the end? Who's still working? Okay. So when you bring down the first number, we take 1 times 1, we get 1. When we add, we get 0. 1 times 0 is 0. Add, you get negative 25. Negative 25 times 1 is negative 25. And when we add, we get 0. So this time, we actually end it with a pattern. Because remember, this is my x squared, this is my x, and that's my constant. Anytime x is 0, we just drop it. So what we're left with is x squared minus 25. And if we go back to what we learned last week, this is the difference of squares, which is a special pattern that does not require a box. You're going to make your 2 parentheses. The only thing that multiplies to give you x squared, the only thing that multiplies to give you x squared is what? X times x. So we're going to put that in the front. 25 is a perfect square. What multiplies to give you 25? 5 times 5. Put that in the back. And then with this pattern, 1 has to be addition and 1 has to be subtraction. And that would be your 3 factors. All right, use the rest of this class period to start working on homework 4. Remember, homework 4 is due Friday.